All right, this is Citizenship and Immigration Attorney Parviz Malakouti. Welcome to our 52nd Mobility Space and the first one of the year. Today is January 5th, 2026. And I'm happy that we're back. Today we're talking about the attack, what I think is an attack, and I'd love to hear from other people, but attack on American dual citizenship by what I'm calling the young right. I was debating how to describe this cohort. I don't know if it's the new right, the young right, whatever, but we'll get into details about what exactly I mean. So, as a reminder for everybody, this is our 52nd mobility space. We did 51 in 2025. And these are basically our spaces are on the hottest topics in dual citizenship, freedom of movement, sovereignty, and of course, passports. Anybody can speak on these spaces. If you want to speak, just send a request. I will approve it right away. And this is just casual conversation. You don't have to come up and say something that's super profound. Whatever it is that you want to share, or if you have a question or comment, just come forward and let us know. Okay, so a couple things. I said at the beginning of last year, 2025, we're going to make a few formatting changes to the show. Here's what those changes are. So first of all, the mobility spaces are only on Mondays for 2026. So that means we're going to do 50 or so, give ourselves a couple weeks to take a break. Mobility spaces, we're not doing any on Thursdays like we did last year. So that's change number one. Number two, we're doing a 1 hour hard cap. Okay, so in 2025, for the first 50 or so mobility spaces, we kind of just let these things rip and just rode them until they petered out. We're going to do a hard cap of 1 hour, subject to exceptions here and there if we have a really, really spicy hot topic or if there's a lot to say. Change number three, we're going to be integrating a lot more guests. So I'm going to start reaching out to people that I, respect, or people that have a lot of, interesting things on a specific topic related to the mobility spaces to talk about. And I'm going to start inviting them on as co-hosts or just to interview them. And then we'll basically have our open discussion towards the end of the space, just as we've had previously. Okay. So I got here my trusty co-host for today's space. It's Patrick McFawn of Excellent Consulting, helping people with citizenship by descent. And of course, we've got David Bindell here, as well as our anonymous listeners. So let's get into the topic. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today is this new trend that I think we're seeing among what I'm calling the young right to attack American dual citizenship and say that dual citizenship shouldn't be a thing. Okay, that if you're American, you should not have another citizenship, that if you're American, if you naturalize elsewhere, you should lose your American citizenship. Now, this is mostly talk, okay, for now, right? And obviously, we've spoken before on previous spaces about how there are a lot of safeguards, legal safeguards, constitutional safeguards, case law, Afrin v. Rust, protecting the robustness of American citizenship and therefore the ability to hold American dual citizenship. But I am interested in what the speech is, what the discourse is around this, because these types of things, if there's a lot of talk and if it's not addressed, sometimes these things can obviously translate into action. Okay, an action that can affect people's citizenship. And we have had a little bit of a precursor, right? We had the Bernie Moreno bill introduced in, I think it was early December of last year. Bernie Moreno, the GOP senator from Ohio, introduced the Anti-Dual Citizenship Act in Congress, basically trying to make it effectively impossible to be an American dual citizen. Now, obviously, there's been massive pushback against the Bernie Moreno bill, but just the fact that he introduced it to me is alarming enough to catch my attention and to think that this is a type of trend that needs to be addressed, or at least thought about, discussed among people who are American dual citizens or aspiring dual citizens, or people who just think that as an American, you should have the freedom to hold whatever citizenships it is that you want. So we had the Bernie Moreno bill. Okay, that was a direct attack on American dual citizenship. And then we had, I guess, what you could kind of call two maybe corollary attacks on dual citizenship. And that's a bill introduced by Thomas Massie and then a bill introduced by Randy Fine. Those bills didn't purport to make American dual citizenship illegal, but what they tried to do, or what they are trying to do, is to attack the ability of an American dual citizen to serve in Congress, either by making it fully illegal or by at least requiring a disclosure. Right, the Massey bill, at least in its initial form, just purported to try to make it mandatory, a mandatory disclosure for dual citizens who are running for Congress. So there's three pieces of legislation, right, that were introduced that somehow, some way affect dual citizenship or the ability of Americans to hold dual citizenship. And then, not legal, not bills, not legal challenges, but I think arguably just as impactful is all of this discourse by leading figures, what I consider to be leading figures on the right, especially what I consider, like I said, the new right. Okay, Tucker Carlson has stated multiple times on his podcast and in his speech that he made. I think it was at the Turning Point USA speech. Maybe somebody can correct me on that, but I believe it was the end of the summer. He went on a long rant about divided loyalties. He objected to American citizens serving in foreign armies. That's one thing. That's not necessarily an attack on American dual citizenship. But then he went on to say it just outright, okay, plain English, as an American, you should not have dual citizenship. What is this? Well, Tucker Carlson is extremely popular. I mean, he's as big as you can get on the right as far as a talking head, a media personality. And since he has kind of come out with that line, we've seen what I think kind of a spate of copycats. Okay, so what I would consider aspiring influencers on the right, okay, young folks coming up, trying to kind of mimic that same sort of line of thinking. I think they're trying to come out against American dual citizenship to get the rub, okay, from that bit of the or that section of the right that's kind of into nationalism, heritage American, that sort of thing. So we've had Michael J. Knowles, right, come out. He had at least one video where he basically railed against American dual citizenship. Nick Fuentes has made multiple statements against American dual citizenship. There's the son of what's her name?
Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley. Thank you, Patrick. Nikki Haley's son, Nayland Haley, went on the Tucker Carlson podcast, and he also railed against American dual citizenship. And to me, it's an interesting phenomenon. I'm a skeptic. I think that a lot of this is just people, young folks, young influencers trying to come up, find a voice, and to grab some of that audience. But I think, like I said before, that these are attacks that need to be considered. They need to be thought about, in my opinion. Okay. Now, obviously, I want to hear from who we have here. We got Patrick. We got David. I'm going to throw out the first question to Patrick here, my trusty co-host. And the question is, Patrick, is bashing dual citizenship the new credibility play for personalities on the young right? And if it is this something that we should just brush off our shoulders, don't give it any oxygen by dealing with it? Or is this something that should start to be addressed or at least thought about by people, by mobily minded Americans who believe in the sovereign individual thesis?
Yeah, fantastic question. Happy 2026, everyone. Glad to be reporting for duty here. I think that bashing dual citizenship we're in the second inning on this. I think it's going to mature to be a larger discussion, more in the mainstream in the future. And you look at what one might consider like fringe political issues, and they move closer and closer, right? So, a concept like, say, Medicare for all suddenly morphs into, hey, maybe we should enact changes in policy around healthcare. Whether or not it's Medicare for all or not, it still advances the theme of the policy issue, right? So I think that's going to be the case with dual citizenship at some point. And I think we're seeing this now. I know there's a bunch of different terms. I know some people describe it as the woke right. Other people call it the fringe right. I have seen that it's kind of breaking apart between what people consider MAGA and an America First, which, if you were to use those labels, this would be the America First branch of the new right. And I think they see it as a proxy for loyalty. And I tweet about this all the time. Citizenship is not a proxy for loyalty. I think loyalty is incredibly difficult to measure. And I have countless examples of how to poke holes in that. But I think that people use dual citizenship because, A, you can rail on it, never do anything yourself and therefore never be a dual citizen. And two, it immediately pre-qualifies criticism of another political opponent. And, unfortunately, we've learned since, I don't know, probably the 90s, that the more you personalize an attack in politics, the more poignant it is, and therefore the more you get the message out, right? It was, the one headline that John McCain ever had against President Obama was that he was quote unquote a socialist, and that was like a criticism of him, right? It was and the reverse is true, right? If someone lies, it's very personalized, and therefore people get moved to vote or to read a news article. Like, it's a very quick way to get attention. And so I think if you put your flag in the sand and say, hey, I'm against dual citizen, well, then anytime there's a politician or a judge or someone who has dual citizenship, you don't have to explain anything. You've already pre-qualified it. They clearly have divided loyalties. They don't have your interest at heart because they don't represent you. They're an other. And I think that is a time-tested political argument that is expedient, but it moves people. And it's, in my opinion, very disingenuous, but I think that's kind of where it's coming from. And if you have this backdrop of saying, oh, we don't want to get involved in foreign affairs at all, or, wars abroad, or blah, 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 it's a easy cudgel to pre-qualify yourself as and use, revisit again and again. And I think Tucker is a perfect example of this, because there's multiple scenarios where he's dunked on dual citizens and gone as far as to say that he's been offered dual citizenship and still dunks on it, right? That's another form of him like pre-clearing his criticisms of others. And so I think this will ultimately in some way feed into a broader discourse, because anytime there's a foreign conflict, there will be questions about dual citizens. And I tweeted it, posted it on X an hour ago. Like, people are already asking about the new mayor of New York's security clearance, because, President Maduro is incarcerated at MCD Brooklyn right now. So I think, and I'm sure in a month you will hear about Venezuelan American dual citizens, because the tumult that conflict has will have Americans who also have Venezuelan citizenship. And depending on the way the country goes, there may or may not be criticisms of people who hold dual citizenship, which is potentially a good number of people, and also a good number of people that may or may not serve local interests, community positions, or government. So I think this issue is going to continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk a couple minutes down the line. I want to talk about what Americans should do, if anything, right, to prepare against a more robust attack, heavier attack against American dual citizenship. But before we get there, Patrick, I mean, do you think this is scoring points, social media points? Do you think people, do you think these influencers or these personalities are actually getting the rub from bashing American dual citizenship from what you've seen?
Yes, I do. I do, because more often than not, it's usually used to criticize American Israeli dual citizens. And so, without putting too many words in people's mouths, I think that a lot of times it's kind of used as a cudgel, and then beyond that, any other dual citizens, it's convenient, right? And so, we saw that in the case where several judges were, putting up issue with President Trump's executive orders, and they would come on and say, like, "Oh, this judge is originally from Trinidad and Tobago." I'm sorry, I pronounce it with a Latin accent. Trinidad and Tobago. Therefore, they can't be trusted as a U.S. judge who's, obviously sworn an oath to the Constitution and is an American citizen. And that's convenient, right? And you can see that also, again, with the mayor of New York. People are like, oh, he has Ugandan citizenship. It's So I think people get in. I think they get clicks and they get popularity on the issue because of real or perceived issues related to Israel and Israeli U.S. dual citizens. But I think it then becomes convenient on a broader scale just to hammer home a very America first message, and it's political expediency and convenience after that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think a large part of at least the impetus is the attack on Israel, American Israeli dual citizens, especially in government. And I think we really have to split this discussion up into two parts, right? One is the drive towards banning or at least restricting American dual citizens in government, high government posts. And the other is the more global attack on just the concept of American dual citizenship, the ability to have dual citizenship as an American. I'm much more interested in the latter, okay, both personally and professionally, right? Personally, because I'm just not interested in running for office. Professionally, because that attack affects potentially a lot more people. But I am interested in both, right? I'm definitely interested in where the attack on American dual citizens in government goes, because I think that's a precursor. I think it's entwined with a general attack against dual citizenship. Um, Here's the thing. I mean, I don't know if this is by design, Patrick and David, or if these people really are just clueless. But the loudest voices that are attacking American dual citizenship really show their ignorance about how citizenship works and how dual citizenship works, right? One thing that I've hammered, okay, ad nauseum. I'm sorry if you're listening to this. You probably heard me say this on a space 50 times, tweet about it 50 times, is the concept of citizenship by operation of law. Okay, I'm confident saying this. 9 on the end. 99% of people do not really understand what citizenship by acquisition of law means and what the downstream consequences of it means. By acquisition of law means you become a citizen of a country automatically, okay, either at birth or at some later date. For example, a few countries have citizenship by acquisition of law through marriage, but most of the time it's by birth. This means you did nothing, okay, to become a citizen of a foreign country. Okay, you didn't file a form. Okay, you didn't go to the country. You didn't pass a language test. Okay, you may not even know it. Okay, you may not even know that you became a citizen by operation of law. And in fact, I believe millions of Americans, as well as other people around the world, are dual citizens by operation of law, and they have no knowledge of it. Okay. So to understand citizenship by acquisition of law, you have to understand that citizenship is a status, okay, when it's not a naturalization, it's a status that's imposed, okay, by a foreign government. And by operation of law means it happens whether you want it to happen or not, whether you did something to make it happen or not, whether you know or not. So therefore, if you follow that logically, okay, that means that other countries can make you a citizen, or maybe they already made you a citizen. Okay. So I've made the argument, I use Ted Cruz as an example, others as well. I've made the argument that there's probably, okay, I'm sure about this. I mean, how am I sure? I'm willing to stake I'm willing to stake whatever, credibility I have. Not that I have some big credibility, but I'm sure that in the future, in the next year or two, some of these big characters, personalities that are really against American dual citizenship are going to find out that they are actually dual citizens by operation of law. They're going to throw a big hissy fit, say, "Oh, I didn't ask for this citizenship," all this type of stuff, all that, all that. But the point is that if you pass laws that prohibit, restrict, or criminalize American dual citizenship, you're putting Americans in an extremely precarious situation. Any American, because a foreign government can make you a citizen, whether you want it or not, whether you know or not, any of that. So what you're doing, if you have a law in the United States, a domestic law, okay, that let's say makes American dual citizenship unlawfully, you're effectively putting a trigger, okay, with a serious consequence on Americans. You're putting a trigger into foreign domestic law, okay? And there's depending on what number you want to use, there's 195 plus foreign countries, right? Any one of those countries, okay, through passing a law in their parliament or whatever, okay, can change their citizenship laws. Okay, oh, your great grandfather was from whatever Mali or whatever. Now we consider you a citizen of Mali by acquisition of law, not a naturalized citizen. Okay, Not that you requested to become a citizen, you sent an application, or you parented and became a derivative to the naturalization application, but automatically citizenship by operation of law. These people, I don't think, understand that. Okay, or that's, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they don't understand. Maybe the alternative, more pessimistic view is that they do understand. They just don't care, or they do understand it, and they're just basically pounding this talking point for clicks or whatever. But the downstream consequences for America and Americans. Okay, we are a country of immigrants. Okay, a vast percentage of Americans have a parent, grandparent, or great grandparent that was an immigrant into the country. The downstream consequences for these people, okay, Americans who have been here their whole life, okay, by trying to prohibit or outlaw American dual citizenship when other countries can impose it by operation of law, is just an astounding attack on American citizenship in general. Just American citizenship, right? So American dual citizenship, attacks on American dual citizenship, it's not I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a separate thing, but it's absolutely inextricably entwined with the robustness of American citizenship itself. Because the fact that other countries, the United States as well, imposes citizenship by operation of law, but the fact that, let's say, countries in general impose citizenship by operation of law, okay, means that we're all vulnerable to another country making us a dual citizen. And in fact, I have said before, I made a bunch of tweets at the beginning of last year, 2025, okay, that if America were to pass a law to automatically make it unlawful for American dual citizens to serve in Congress, I feel certain, okay, that some countries, okay, I think most countries, okay, would start looking at how they can gain that to their advantage. How would they do that? They would identify people, their biggest critics in Congress or among candidates in Congress, who oftentimes are among their own diaspora, okay, and make a statement. Hey, we consider, Iran, okay, we consider, this Iranian American, son of our, refugee who fled during 1979. We consider him an Iranian citizen. Okay, yeah, that guy who's criticizing Iran and is going to go into Congress possibly and enact or introduce legislation that's anti-Iranian. We consider him an Iranian citizen. That's our veto. We're taking him off the board as a congressional candidate. That level of outsourcing and incorporation of foreign domestic law into what we do in the United States is totally unacceptable. Okay, I just think that people who pound this anti-American dual citizenship drum don't even understand it. They don't know this thing exists. But I want to hear from other people. Obviously, I'm deep in the weeds on this. We got Brent here. Brent's always got great conversation. David, let me throw this question out to you. David, do you think these people who pound against American dual citizenship understand how citizenship by operation of law works and its downstream consequences, or do they know about it but they just don't care? They're basically pounding this for clicks and for audience.
I strongly doubt that they are aware of the implications of what exclusive citizenship would actually imply for the vast majority of Americans who hold plural citizenship in other countries or who might be interested in it. I'm also curious, in the most absurd example, could another country, let's say, I don't know, let's say France, just suddenly declare that all U.S. citizens are now considered citizens of France, and therefore there's not even any real people who are Americans by operation of the United States law, and there would be an instant dissolution of the entire government, and we're left with nothing. I guess we could reform from the ground up at that point if we really wanted to. It's absurd, but if somebody really wanted to game the system, that would be the clear way to do it.
That's a great point, David. And I tweeted it at the beginning of last year that I think if you logically follow the consequences of banning complete ban, okay, of American dual citizenship or dual citizens in Congress, that would force a new concept of U.S. recognition of foreign citizenship, right? Because we'd have to have, to your point, we'd have to have a mechanism by which we say, okay, we recognize that you're a dual citizen, or we don't recognize that you're a dual citizen. And, that's not really something that we, in the United States, there hasn't really been a real need for that, just yet. For yeah. So I think that any type of legislation like that passing would have to force, this new concept. We'd have to have some type of screening mechanism within U.S. law, okay, to stop absolute abuse, okay, of basically this type of law by foreign governments, the way you said. Now, the thing is, okay, somebody might stop there and say, okay, well, that's the solution. That's how we prohibit American dual citizenship and we make sure that other countries don't abuse it. But what does that do? I mean, that means that the person still, in fact, okay, remains an American dual citizen. Okay, they're still a citizen of the foreign country and still get to, have whatever benefits, immediate highest right of entry and stay in that foreign country, a passport, okay, by that country, etc. It's just that America hasn't recognized them as an American dual citizen. Okay, so that would defeat the whole purpose of this law, or not this law, but this kind of spate of laws, as I understand it, is to stop the person from realizing the benefit of citizenship in a foreign country. Okay, the idea being that that's somehow going to influence how they act in the United States, whether they're in our Congress or just an American dual citizen walking around. Brent, can you talk? If so, I want to hear what you have to say about this. We got Tucker Carlson, Michael J. Knowles, Bernie Moreno, Randy Fines, Thomas Massey, Nayland Haley, okay? Voices in what we've termed the young right, or the woke right, the fringe right, the American first, whatever it is you want to call it. But this kind of cohort, okay, this subset of the American right that's coming out strongly against American dual citizenship, both to serve in Congress as well as just in general, just the idea that if you're American, you should not be able to have dual citizenship. What are your thoughts on this? And do we need to take this seriously? Do we need to form a political action committee? Do we need to have an interest group to track these things formally? All right, maybe Brent can't speak. I said it at one of the last spaces last year. I got to stop this bad habit of teeing up a long question and just dropping it on somebody as if we're like in first year of law school and putting them on the spot. Okay, so sorry for that, Brent. If you can talk, join. We'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, we'll continue on, of course. So yeah, so
I'll jump in here
Go
actually,
ahead.
if it's cool. I thought I'd give a little quick slice of the kind of the history here, because dual citizenship in the American context has not really existed for that long, right? Let's say 3-4 generations. There was a time period, right, in the first half of the 20th century where dual citizenship was not allowed from the United States government, but there was no mechanism to enforce it, and most other countries had similar legal arrangements where you had one recognized citizenship. And the way this worked in practice is that if you came from Europe and you had your citizenship of birth, and you came to the United States and you naturalized as a U.S. citizen, you then gave up, presumably, your citizenship of the country you came from. However, I'm going to get my dates mixed up here, but there was a period where if you left the U.S. for more than 2 years, it was assumed that you had expatriated, and therefore your citizenship was not recognized. And in most European countries, if you went to the United States, became a citizen, and then came back to the European country of your origin, you could just go down to the local municipal office and get your citizenship re-recognized like that, because it was one that was provided to you at birth. And so the practical outcome was that even though you were not a dual citizen, you still had the claim to a foreign citizenship, even though the American government didn't recognize it when you were an American citizen. And it sounds like a really goofy patchwork, and that's because it kind of is. And at some point, I would imagine, in today's world, we realize how goofy and clumsy that sort of system is. So recognizing dual citizenship for an American makes sense when America says you have to present just your U.S. proof of your U.S. citizenship, your U.S. passport, at immigration solely when you come to the United States. The UK does that now too. That's far easier than managing a system like the one Parvis just suggested, which is having to manage a database or some sort of formal administrative process where you're keeping track of people's foreign citizenships. And so I think that there's like a really good lesson in history. I mean, people generally are not historically very literate, but if you get into the weeds of history, you'll see the glaring flaws exactly as Parva just brought up. And there was no good workaround with less technology back then, and I would imagine that the solution today would be presumably just as bad, just with more expensive technology and frankly potential for abuse.
Yeah. So yes, because of the Bancroft treaties, right, at the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were these bilateral treaties, exactly like you said, Patrick, whereby if an American went to Hungary or vice versa or whatever, after a period of time, they could naturalize in the other country and automatically lose the citizenship of the country they had left. I'll push back a little bit, Patrick, on one thing that you said. There were dual citizens. There were American dual citizens well before a few generations ago. Okay, it was more of a restriction on attaining American dual citizenship by naturalizing elsewhere. But there were people that were born American dual citizens by operation of law. And in fact, in the case that's going to be seminal in the Supreme Court birthright case that's going to be heard this year, right? United States v. Wong Kim Ark. All throughout that decision, okay, it's not contested that Wong Kim Ark was born a subject of China, okay, which I think you can basically say is like kind of their corollary of being a citizen. And then obviously the argument was whether he was a birthright citizen in the United States or not, right? And obviously that decision went in his favor. So there still was American dual citizenship before the spate of cases in the 1950s and 1960s leading up to Afroim, which clarified that a person, a U.S. citizen, could naturalize elsewhere and not automatically lose their citizenship. It's just that those cases really kind of made it more difficult all around the board to basically have to attack a person's American dual citizenship. So one thing that I've heard it be argued is, okay, well, let's restrict it. Let's make it so that if you're an American, you can't naturalize elsewhere. Okay, let's restrict that. If a person is born in American dual citizenship by operation of law, meaning automatically they're born in the United States, their parent is from, I don't know, Spain, they're automatically an American Spaniard. We'll leave those alone. But at very least, we're not going to have you sign a document to naturalize in another country, pledge allegiance. Typically, most naturalization, forms ask you to pledge some sort of allegiance. Well, my response to that is yes, administratively, right, you could argue that would be easier and that would take away the attack vector of people becoming American dual citizens by operation of law and therefore their vulnerability to actions of foreign countries outside of their control. But then what would that do? That would make two tiers of Americans, right? Like you'd be totally privileged if you were born an American dual citizen, right? And John Richardson always jokes about this, right? It's like American dual citizenship from birth, right? It's like another class of person. But what that would do, the solution that I just mentioned is basically say, if you're American dual citizen from birth, you're blessed, good luck. Okay, you got the freedom of immediate highest right of entry in 2 countries or more. But if you're just born an American citizen, you want to naturalize elsewhere, okay, then you can't do it. That wouldn't address what the people who are against American dual citizenship claim is the attack, okay, which is, divided loyalties, etc. All you've done is create 2 different classes, which is obviously unfair and unequal and all that. So I've not yet to hear somebody put forth a cogent argument for how a ban on American dual citizenship could actually work and not make it so that we are totally abused or subject to abuse by foreign countries, okay? Or just, create a 2-tier system of American citizens, or make it so that you've put together some hodgepodge of restrictions such that, the original purpose of or stated purpose of banning the dual citizenship is not even satisfied, meaning like, American, the United States doesn't recognize your foreign citizenship, but you still get to keep it. You still get the passport. You can still do whatever it is that you want in that foreign country. I've not heard a cogent argument. Okay. And that partially, I think, makes me wonder whether I'm just giving this too much oxygen and even thinking about it, right? Or writing about it. I just think that, when there's smoke, you don't want to ignore it and turn and say, oh, it's nothing until it's an absolute blazing inferno and you're doing everything that you can to put it out. that's that's kind of the reason why I think about this as an attack vector and why I'm talking about it and discussing with other people. Let me throw it back to you, Patrick. You know, is this something we should, obviously we'll keep it on the radar, but is this kind of something we should just kind of keep in the background, on the radar, or is this something where, American dual citizens, people who are aspiring dual citizens, should start to organize a little bit, formally organize, to prepare for this type of attack? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that if a criticism goes unanswered, then then it tends to grow. And so I don't know if it makes sense to prepare messaging from the impracticality of the administrative aspects of it. I generally think it's still a political talking point, and so it should be responded to in a political, like a thoughtful political response. And that's why I always stick to my guns and say citizenship is not a proxy for loyalty, because the arguments against dual citizenship never get into the details. They almost always stay at, well, you can't be loyal to two countries. And it's like, have you met half of Americans? Half of Americans don't want to pay taxes. They would never join the military. Like, I don't know where this concept of citizenship as a proxy for loyalty comes from. I do, but at the same time, in practice, I don't. Another loud person on the right is Stephen Crowder, who is openly a Canadian-American dual citizen. And he openly says, oh, I've never claimed it. I've never done anything with it. I don't have a Canadian passport, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't matter. You're still a Canadian citizen. If he goes to IRCC and fills out his proof of citizenship, he'll get it in like 3 weeks. And he's like, oh, well, that's very common. And he's from the greater Detroit region. He's like, oh, it's very common in Michigan. It's like, well, yeah, that's the point, bro. There's a lot of Americans like that who might not even know. And all they have to do is just show up and get it recognized. It would take close to nothing, right, for them to do so.
And I would argue, Patrick, sorry to interrupt, whether they filled out the form to get it recognized or not does not change the fact.
Exactly.
Okay, it's like it's the tree, it's the proverbial tree falling in the forest. Okay, it fell, it made a noise, regardless of whether or when you went out there to measure it. AKA fill out a form for recognition of the citizenship. Just wanted to add that. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, 100%. That is exactly correct. And I mean, if you look at it by operation of law, that's not an insignificant number of Americans, and that's one country, right? And so I go back and that's why I always talk about why it's not a proxy for loyalty, right? Like, if you could actually make the argument that someone, investing so much time, money, effort, and a sizable fraction of their life to naturalize as an American citizen probably has more loyalty to the United States than someone who might have been born here and has no other choice, right? So I think the political messaging behind it needs to be countered, because there really is no voice that's like, yeah, dual citizenship is valuable, particularly for individuals, because people generally speak to political talking points or ideological talking points as opposed to individual freedoms or options. And I think, because it started with Tucker Carlson and now has like Nick Fuentes and Stephen Crowder was not talking about dual citizenship 5 years ago. I think because you have more and more people signing on to this idea, I think is a sign that it's going to continue to grow. And I don't think there's a person who is the opposing viewpoint on that who has any level of exposure or reach. So I do think at least politically there should be a response to it.
Yeah, and so I want to ask David a question. In a moment, I want to get into what I think Americans should do on an individual level. So not organizing, to prepare, just basically to mind their P's and Q's, as they say. But my question is to David: how concerned are you about this attack vector that seems to be developing on the right?
I'm not too sure. I think that what they have not considered is the constitutionality and the Supreme Court precedents for dual citizenship. I mean, I'm sure somebody has thought it through, but I think, like Patrick was saying, these really are more just talking points. Could they materialize into real law eventually? Yeah, I suppose so. But I think that the constitutional issues have not yet been. Well, I think that there are constitutional issues in this bill that's been proposed, and I think that there would be constitutional issues in any similar bills that might be proposed in the future. So just to continue on what I think Patrick was saying a little while ago, um, my perception is that these really are this argument really is standing in as a proxy for, in my opinion, I think dual citizenship with Israel primarily, and it's popular. And is it possible to argue against? I'm sorry. Is it possible to argue for dual citizenship remaining as it is? Yeah, I think so, but I don't think that's going to be a very popular argument. I think that it gets quickly into the weeds, into the technicalities, whereas the argument that Tucker Carlson and these other, I guess, right influencers are promoting is, easy to readily agree with if you don't understand the implications further on.
I agree, David. And in fact, I've often thought to myself, if I wanted to appeal to an American nationalist type, what's the argument that I would make to counter their argument? And the best one I've come up with so far, I'd love to hear if somebody has, other ideas, is that if you prohibit American dual citizenship or prohibit people from serving in Congress who have American dual citizenship, you're basically incorporating the laws of foreign countries. Okay, you're basically handing the key, you're handing power to foreign countries for them to decide, right, by negative implication, who's in our Congress, okay, who can keep American citizenship, right? That's kind of a nationalistic argument, I think, right? It's like, you're a nationalist, but you want to pass a law that basically hands this awesome power to a foreign country to decide. It's a veto card. That's what I've called it. You want to hand a veto card to governments of every country in the world. Okay, they get to veto, right? Who doesn't who gets to serve in Congress, right? Because they could just claim them as a citizen, especially if they have some sort of descent, okay, from that country. And as we've alluded to before, so many Americans, dude, like, find me an American that doesn't have, at least at the great grandparent level, okay, a great grandparent grandparent that was not from a foreign country. Like, there's some, but it's difficult. Okay, we're all connected somehow. Okay, to foreign countries. Can you think, David or Patrick, whoever wants to take it, can you think of an argument that appeals to the nationalist type, a counter argument to them trying to attack American dual citizenship?
No, I haven't given it a lot of thought yet, but I think that while the argument you just presented is it makes sense to those of us who have studied this a little bit. I don't think that most people are that tuned in to understand the implications. And although you're technically correct, it's a technicality and it's a hypothetical. That until some other nation actually tries to exercise that, I don't think that it would be real enough for people to appreciate your argument.
I would go so far as to say that I'm not entirely sure. Because if you appeal, it's easy to appeal to a libertarian if they have, from the dual citizenship argument. I think that's something we're all pretty familiar with. I do think that because America treats American citizenship as kind of this like supreme citizenship, for anyone who has a portfolio of citizenships, I think there's an argument there that might appeal to a like sort of America First nationalist type. But you can't. It's difficult because these people are not inherently. They're not inherently ideological in the sense that it's like a libertarian or a rights-based perspective. It's a nationalist perspective, right? And so if you it's hard to argue an individual's perspective of options against someone who's arguing for a nationalist cause. And so, in that sense, you have to respond to them in a way that argues that what they're trying to achieve with a nationalist perspective is detrimental to a nationalist cause. And I think part of it is I think your argument does that. I just don't know how to fit it into a slogan or a one sentence, because it's an intelligent perspective, and it's difficult to explain to someone who's trying to be quippy and short and get a headline that, hey, the practicality of this, if you think it through more than just first order thinking, is pretty ridiculous. And I think that's difficult to do. So if there's a way to get a critique down to like maybe 1.5 sentences, then I think we're in a lot better position.
Yeah, great point, Patrick. And yeah, I whether David said it or Patrick, we're going to need some famous examples, I think, and I'm hoping Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio can unintentionally help us with that. Maybe a slogan like "Only Americans decide," or something like we don't let foreigners. No, that's not catchy. Something maybe like American Congress members decided by American law only. So something like that. Those aren't really that great, but something along those lines that just draws into contrast, makes it crystal clear what it means to give a veto to foreign country. Go ahead, Patrick.
Their big thing is foreign influence, and so maybe the line is something like, no dual citizenship creates a ton of foreign influence.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be counterintuitive to kind of the low information, low IQ type of person, but that's the point. Okay, we got 10 minutes here. Okay, I want to talk about just a couple quick things and then get some thoughts, and then we'll talk about what we want to do for the next space. Ted Cruz. Okay, Ted Cruz was born in Canada. Okay, he was Texas Attorney General. Okay, he relinquished the spot to run for Senate. Okay, and then in 2013, the Dallas Morning News reported that Ted Cruz was a dual citizen, American Canadian dual citizenship. And Ted Cruz responded by saying, "I had no idea. I didn't know that's the case." Okay. And he went and ran and relinquished his Canadian citizenship, right, to serve in Congress, even though it wasn't obligated. He did it, ostensibly to kind of get in line with this nationalistic perspective. Okay, couple points. Ted Cruz argued before the U.S. Supreme Court 9 times. I heard his entire oral argument on at least one case a couple times. That's Medellin v. Texas, which I was reading and researching for a separate issue. Okay, Ted Cruz, Harvard educated. Is it Harvard or Yale? One of the two. Excuse me, Harvard or Yale law educated. Extremely knowledgeable, legally knowledgeable guy. Okay, whether that's apparent from his talking points, right, or not. I don't buy that he didn't know that he was a dual American Canadian citizenship. What I think is probably most likely is that he had an idea that that's probably the case, but because it was unrealized, meaning like maybe he had not filed for some sort of recognition yet, okay, that he probably thought he'll keep that in the background as some sort of latent option. Okay, so a call option in the background, and he'll make a decision on it when one of a couple things happens. One is the media discovers it and there's uproar against it, okay, and then he'll relinquish, which is what ended up happening. Or maybe he doesn't, maybe he's just a one-term senator, gets out, realizes freedom of movement is the answer, and he wants to start observing the benefits of the practical benefits of American dual citizenship. I think that's probably what he did. Okay, now will we ever know? Probably not. Okay, unless he decides to have a tell-all, okay, a dramatic, sensationalist tell-all. But the reason I'm bringing him up is because Ted Cruz's father is from Cuba, okay, and I have not yet researched the Cuban Constitution, the Cuban statutes just yet. I may do that as a fun project, but there's a damn good chance, okay, that Ted Cruz also became a Cuban citizen by operation of law when he was born. Now, just Googling around, okay, I've Googled around to see whether there's anything written that shows up regarding Ted Cruz and Cuban citizenship or whether he's made a comment on it. I could not find anything, okay? So I believe that he might still be a dual citizen, okay? I think Ted Cruz may have been born a triple citizen by operation of law, okay, at birth, American, Canadian, Cuban. He was discovered as being the Canadian citizen, okay, relinquished that in response. And I think he might still, like that guy, like the officer in Inglourious Basterds, he might be hiding a Cuban citizenship under his floorboards. So I think that's a little issue to look into. Whether I research it or somebody else might end up researching and determine, give an opinion that he's a Cuban citizen by birth. Any thoughts on that, Patrick? Do you want to come down? We don't mind making predictions here on the spaces. We make predictions sometimes. Do you have any thoughts on whether you think that's likely or not, or how likely?
I need to research the Cuban Constitution a little bit more about transfer of citizenship. Usually with most communist countries, once you leave, they tell you not to come back and don't let the door hit you on the way out. But that probably changed in 93, 94 is my guess. Solely a guess. I don't know. But I have, for what it's worth, I have gotten documents out of Cuba before for research. It is incredibly expensive and it is incredibly lengthy and arduous. And my guess is that if any of you have ever hung out in Miami at the Cigar Lounge and talked to anyone about this stuff before, which I can confidently say I have, most people don't continue to get, who are born in Cuba, don't continue to get Cuban documents issued just because the administrative piece is so arduous. But it doesn't mean they're not Cuban citizens. And so that's a really long-winded way of saying, my guess is that he is a Cuban citizen and he's never realized it because there's no digital way to confirm that. You would have to fly to Havana, pull the records, and get it recognized. But by operation of law, my guess is that he is.
All right, interesting. So Patrick is falling down on not sure, has to research, but maybe a possibility that he is. David, you want to give a prediction? If not, we'll bring the space home with the last thoughts about what Americans should do individually to prepare for a possible future attack on dual citizenship.
I agree with Patrick's analysis. I did have a hypothetical that I'd like to drop in y'all's laps to see if you have any thoughts on it.
Go ahead.
What if there was a United States citizen who was a dual citizen with some other country, a foreign country specifically, who also held citizenship under a federally recognized American Indian tribe?
That's a great question. And Alex,
how would the new law affect such a person?
Sorry to interrupt there. That's a great question. Alex Ugorji brought that up in one of our old spaces, the 20 something. And I told him, I'll tell you the same thing I told him there, okay, which is I don't really know much about how nationality in Native American tribes works. It's kind of something I have on my list, my curiosity list of things to research and kind of figure out. But I'm not really sure how federal law treats that, as a nationality. So I have to say I don't know, but that is a super interesting topic, and I definitely think that's worthy of exploration.
Oh man, just as John Richardson jumps on it, I get to use a Canada example. If you're looking for kind of the tip of the spear on that kind of sovereignty with, Native American or Native Canadian tribes, Canada is probably the number one place on the tip of the spear, and it's still not clear cut. But the short answer is anyone who is a Native American is a citizen of that. We call them reservations here in the United States. I believe they're called reserves in Canada. They have the ability to determine who is a citizen, but at the same time, they cannot admit new citizens. So if you marry someone who's a Native American, you don't suddenly get that Native American citizenship status. And then on top of that, as far as mobility is concerned, your American citizenship is, or in this case, Canadian citizenship, reigns supreme in terms of like enforceability of borders, right? Let's say a historical reservation crosses an international border, which is very common. Like that, Canada, the United States, they're like, nope, our borders reign supreme. But in terms of status, there's this hodgepodge of like tribes have the criteria to determine who is a citizen, but at the same time, they can't admit people who weren't born into the status. And that conversation, changes, and it's changing a lot faster in Canada.
Interesting. So to be, but not to become, in effect, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting it. There's a Arabic Bedouin tribe in Israel, right, where you're not allowed, you can't become a member of that tribe, but you are an Israeli citizen.
Interesting.
I can't believe I'm blanking on their names, but it's kind of similar. You can be born into it, but you can't get processed to become one, so to speak.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that. So, what should Americans do? Okay, so we talked about the possibility of organizing, etc. But on an individual level, right? I'm a citizenship attorney. I'm interested, in these topics intellectually, but more so than anything from a perspective, an advisor perspective, a lawyer perspective. Two things that come to my mind right away. Okay. First of all, exercise citizenship privacy. Okay. If we start seeing any of these attacks against American dual citizenship start being realized, obviously the low-hanging fruit is people who have already been public with being an American dual citizenship, a citizen, triple citizen, etc. So resist the urge to post. I know when you naturalize elsewhere, or when you're recognized as a citizen by descent elsewhere, it's a super exciting time in your life. I know this. Obviously, I have clients. We do this. Super, super exciting. Okay, you want to share the good news. I say to you, resist the urge to post your passports, to post, woohoo, I just became a citizen of XYZ today, etc. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. You get a little pop, okay? But what you're doing, the internet is forever. What you're doing is creating a trail, okay, a paper trail that's going to exist forever, that's going to last forever. And, we've lived, at least in, I'm 41 years old. Our generation has lived during a period of time that, it's been easy to be an American dual citizen. It's not actually been like serious attacks against it. But that doesn't mean it's always going to be this way. Okay, we could be, looking down the line, a few years down the line, we could be in a very real situation where, there's either full attack or partial attack on American dual citizenship. Don't be the low-hanging fruit for enforcement. Okay, exercise citizenship privacy. Okay, that's number one. Number two, get the other citizenship now if you don't have it already. Okay, get it ASAP. Why? Okay, because and nobody has a crystal ball to know what law is going to pass, how it's going to be enforced, etc. But generally, we have a concept of grandfathering, right? Oftentimes, when new laws come out that restrict things, and I'm not just talking about in the citizenship and immigration realm, just generally, okay. People who, when a new type of status or thing or possession of an object is being restricted or outlawed, oftentimes laws grandfather people who already have the status or have the thing. So, firearms, okay, so the assault weapon ban, 1994, okay, that was passed. People already had them. Okay, if they filled out a form, they were grandfathered in. Land restrictions, building restrictions, in all different aspects of laws, okay, as a politically expedient, mechanism to prevent like total revolt from people who already have these things and their lives would be upended. Oftentimes there's grandfathering provisions. Okay, so what does that mean? That means if you have it, okay, you're good or at least better. Okay, and if you don't have it, okay, well, if such a law passes that restricting or attacking American dual citizenship, you're going to have to make a tough decision after that law passes. Either don't become an American dual citizen or do it unlawfully. Okay. So that my second, to do or action item, okay, which is, probably obvious to everybody, which is if you have access to a dual citizenship, if you're thinking about it, picking up, citizenship by investment or citizenship in another country after a period of residency, or naturalizing by descent, or getting a recognition by descent, which are not the same things, right? Act sooner than later, act right away, get that citizenship in the pocket, and then don't post about it. Resist the temptation. I know if you're in these spaces, it's tough. Okay, we got these figures, we got these influencers. It seems like everybody's posting up, I'm a dual citizen, I'm a triple citizen, I got 4 passports, right? People want to get in on that excitement. Okay. The benefit of having this status, okay, dual citizen, multiple citizen, is all the things you can do in your personal life. Getting the little social media pop from Reddit or Twitter or whatever from posting about this, in my opinion, for the vast majority of people, is not worth it. Okay. Now, if you're in the business and you're going to actually get clients and leads by showing, that you're actually a multiple citizen, okay, and if you think that's worth everything, that you give up on the the downside, okay, the privacy, giving up the privacy, creating a paper trail that lasts forever, okay, then okay, maybe that analysis is a little bit different for you. But for the vast majority of people, I think they're served by exercising citizenship privacy, which means basically if it's not already absolutely obvious that you're a citizen of a country, okay, if it's a second, third, fourth, or whatever, stay quiet. Don't post about it. Okay. So that's my opinion on that. We're at 12:02 Pacific Standard Time. We've been going for just about 1 hour on the dot because we started at 12:02. We got John Richardson. John, we have a hard cap on our new mobility spaces. We're doing just 1 hour. Okay. I would love to hear from you. You're going to have a space tomorrow. I'm going to join that space. Shout out to anybody who's interested in certificates of loss of nationality and relinquishment of citizenship. John Richardson is going to have a space tomorrow. I'm going to attend that. That's obviously going to be a great discussion, fun and informative. So I'm going to recommend everybody who's interested in this join John's discussion. And I'm just going to take one last minute and just ask, does anybody have a suggestion for our next mobility space? We're doing once weekly now, not bi-weekly. Anybody have a topic? If so, come forth and say it. If not, I'm going to just put up a poll and I'm going to let the interwebs decide. So Patrick, David, John, any suggestions?
Maybe not for next time, but we can put it into the queue maybe in the next 4 to 6 weeks. But just examples of the extraterritorial application of law, because I know we speak to that as an issue, but I think there's a discussion there to show that in practical examples. Maybe we use, maybe Maduro is a bad example, but perhaps people who are like British American dual citizens under some of the speech laws of the UK, stuff like that. I think there's a very there's a thirst for real world examples and maybe some predictions around the future around that.
That's an excellent topic, Patrick. I already had that on my list. I have about 10 topics that I wanted to attack in 2026. And my thoughts about the Maduro thing is, so Maduro he was indicted and I call it kidnapped, okay, for, in part possessing a machine gun in violation of the National Firearms Act. And, before Maduro, we would say, okay, hey, if you want to become an American citizen or legal permanent resident, okay, you're stepping into this type of a machine of just absolute extraterritorial application of American law. Now that Maduro was arrested and brought in, I think there's an interesting discussion about is it even worth it to try to arrange your affairs, okay, to avoid American extraterritorial application of law when they're doing this anyway. I mean, they've arrested and charged the leader of a foreign country, okay, for possession of a machine gun under the National Firearms Act. That's a U.S. law, okay. I mean, if you can be arrested, and as far as I know, Maduro has never had U.S. citizenship, never had legal permanent residence, any type of nexus with the United States, and still they imposed extraterritorial, American law extraterritorially on him. So is it even worth it to try to avoid that? I think that's an interesting discussion to have, and that might be the next topic. But if it's not the next, it's going to be one of the very next. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. John Richardson has a space tomorrow, and also Patrick McFawn might be making his debut on Spaces. We'll see. He might do it this week. So keep an eye out for Patrick McFawn to see if he's gonna host his own space, presumably on some of the same topics this week as well. So that's it. Thank you. Join us for our next mobility space next Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Take care.